I was gonna say, it's just me, and then I wouldn't expect you to keep going, I got people on Zoom. But I do wanna know what they are, so that we can, the new ones. And I don't know if you read them all to me, the new clauses and stuff. No. So I know. You're good. Yeah, I printed a couple more stuff. Okay. They got a print and staple, but this one can go to Liz. All right. Cool. Looks like are the lights on, but they are, it's just overcast out there too.
Hey, Margaret.
Yes, ma'am.
I have to cut out maybe 10 minutes early today. If that's okay.
Yeah, I don't care. We might be done early, who knows? All right,
Okay.
so okay. Okay, good. Karen can hear me. That's all I care about. So all right, let's get started. So in contracts, there's always sections called additional provisions. And that's where we can put in additional information related to the contract that we just need to add in. And so we're very blessed that Damien has provided us an entire catalog of clauses. And so for those of you that are on the computer, I'm going to really quickly upload the file that I created. Give me a second here. Of course, I have to remember where I put it. Should I be concerned? For those of you who are watching the video afterwards, my apologies. Hold on. No, I saved it somewhere. I just don't know where. Oh, there we go. Now I know where it's at. And for everybody that's here in the room, we've got copies for you. I am going to show you really shortly where you can find these clauses as you're moving into, there we go. All right, so there's the file. Did it go? Oh, because I've got it in file. Hold on a minute. It acts like I've never used this before. Okay, so for those of you that are on Zoom, you've got it in your chat. For those of you that are in the room, we've got copies. And if we need more, Stacy will go get us some more. So can everybody see what I put in the chat, and can you quickly get to it? All right, I love all the thumbs up, appreciate it. Oh, here comes Taylor. So let me put it in one more time. All right, there we go. So first of all, clauses, just to kind of show you guys where you can find them. If you're in CTM, and I'm going to share my screen really quickly. For those of you in the room, I'm sorry, because we're not using the big screen TV today. But you go into CTM, and honestly, any contract that you go into, there's a little button above it that always says clauses. So if I'm in a contract to buy and sell in any of these sections, right here where it says clauses in orange, this is where you can find the entire clause catalog. And then you just import them, you just click on the one you want and you put it in the contract. Okay. Now, some of you are going, but Margaret, some of them say MAG. Those are clauses that I have written myself that I use in my contracts. And sometimes you guys get the benefit of those if I don't have something else to work with. So with that, are we ready to dive into the clauses? All right, super duper. All right. So I'm just going to kind of go through these and hopefully I remember to advance the screen. But they go through different forms that you can also use them with. So these are alphabetical, so they are in an actual order. That makes sense. So in an amend extend, you may have a situation where you are changing a buyer's name on the contract. So if you are adding a buyer, you would use the first clause, which says buyer assigns all right, title, and interest in and to the contract to put the new buyer's name by signing below. New buyer's name accepts this assignment and ratifies the contract in its entirety. Also by signing below, seller approves this assignment. So if you're moving it from Stacy Timmerman to Stacy and Ben Timmerman, then it would be Stacy assigning it and she's assigning it to Stacy and Ben Timmerman. Okay. All right. Assignment removing buyer. Sometimes you might get asked to remove a buyer's name. So buyer assigns all right, title, and interest in and to the contract to name of the new buyer by signing below. Remaining buyer accepts this assignment and ratifies the contract in its entirety. Also by signing below, seller approves this assignment. So if we started the contract with Ben and Stacy and Ben's kicking Stacy out, then that's what you would put in there. Okay, so it would be Ben and Stacy and then just to Ben. Okay. Questions. You're not going to use it a whole lot, but every once in a while it does come up.
So this is different from changing someone's name, just adding or subtracting.
This is adding or subtracting a buyer. If you get the lender who calls and says, hey, they filled out the app and instead of using their middle initial, they use their whole middle name, you could just type that in buyer's name now to reflect as. Okay, but this is when you're adding another or subtracting an actual person who's going to be obligated. Okay. All right. The next one is these are ones that you're going to use in the contract to buy and sell. Okay. So if you think back to your contract to buy and sell class, those contracts are not assignable, right? Okay. So this contract is assignable by buyer to an entity wholly owned or controlled by buyer on or before closing. Paragraph 2.2 is amended accordingly. So paragraph 2.2, as you guys will remember, is the one that says it's not assignable. So this is saying it's assignable. So let's say that your buyer is an investor and they want to buy a property and they want to flip it. Now, what some investors will do is they will create a separate LLC, which usually has the address name. Okay, so they might buy the property today under Taylor Vonderak. Okay, however, Taylor's going to go out and get an LLC created for 123 Main Street LLC. So by doing this this clause in your contract, it allows Taylor to assign the contract in the future with the amendment that we just talked about, changing it from Taylor Vonderak to 123 Main Street LLC. So when you have an investor who wants to do that, that's when you would use that.
That's only if they want to do that before or after closing or at closing, right?
Prior to closing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, if they're going to change it, and this has come up a lot recently where they want to change the name, like they'll buy it in one name and then they want to change it to a trust after they close. We don't care about the contract to buy and sell if they're going to do something post-closing. This is before they close. A lot of times your investors want to change the name.
Because they haven't created that LLC yet or
Right.
whatever, and they're just trying to
Exactly.
get under contract.
Yep. Okay. The next two are very similar, so I'm not going to go over through both of them. I think it's pretty obvious. So attorney review seller or returning review buyer. So the seller has the right to terminate this contract if seller's attorney does not approve the terms and conditions of this contract on or before a date. If buyer does not receive seller's notice to terminate on or before the seller attorney approval deadline, then this contingency is deemed waived by the seller. Okay. So when you use a clause like that, you need to go up into the dates and deadlines and add that name, seller attorney approval deadline, or attorney approval deadline if you're doing the buyer one. Okay.
I have a
Taylor,
question.
you got
Yes,
Sure.
so you said oh, can I go?
yeah, I'm waiting on you.
For assignability, you just said 2.2 says it's not assignable. So if you're ever going to do that, they have to just state it in additional provisions.
Right.
Gotcha.
It's normally gonna be an additional provisions where you're gonna put all of these. Okay, Jeff?
And that's one of those blanks that are in the contracts, the lines you'd add at one of those lines.
Yep, so the blank lines that are before possession date, there's those blank dates. That's where you can put in some of these other deadlines that you're creating. But you can't name a deadline without defining the deadline somewhere else in the contract. So by defining seller attorney approval deadline, now putting that deadline up above makes sense. Okay? All right, backup contracts. So first of all, do you guys know what a backup contract is?
Yeah.
No, okay. Thank you. So a backup contract means this. The seller has accepted an offer from another party, another buyer. They're under contract. A backup offer is one that if it is signed by both a different buyer, call it buyer number 2, and the seller, if something happens and buyer number 1 terminates the contract, buyer number 2's contract is automatically accepted and is the contract of record. So when you do a backup contract, first of all, you need some advice. You need to make sure you're talking to Bob, you're talking to me, Charles, right? Get with one of us if you're not sure what to do, if you've never done them before. So typically a backup offer is your buyer is saying, I want this house. I'm willing to sit on the sidelines and hope that the first buyer goes away. Okay. So if you're going to do that, your language is such. Seller is currently under contract to sell the property to another buyer. This is defined as first contract. This contract is contingent upon the termination of the first contract in writing. Upon termination or cancellation of the first contract, seller will notify buyer in writing within 24 hours of such termination or cancellation, and this contingency will be deemed removed, and this contract will be in full force and effect. Congratulations, they just went under contract. If, however, the first contract is not terminated or canceled on or before, fill in a date, this contract automatically terminates and the earnest money will be returned to buyer. So Margaret's going to pause for a minute. Typically, when you are the buyer and you're in backup position, you don't turn in the earnest money. So normally I delete the last part of that sentence. The good thing about clauses is you can adjust them as you need, but it sure gives you 99% of what you need up front. Okay. Seller has the right to extend and or amend the terms and conditions of the first contract without first obtaining permission from buyer. Additionally, seller's obligation to notify buyer of termination or cancellation of the first contract may be extended in the event of a dispute with the buyer on the first contract. Now, the reason you put a date in the middle of that paragraph is you don't want to sit on the sidelines until that other one closes, correct? So normally you would put in, like we've done it where we literally gave them a week or we gave them 10 days. And I will tell you, Stacy's had at least 2 that I can remember where we've gone in as backup, put in a date, and then we either got a call on that date or the day after saying, we are getting ready to terminate. Are you guys still interested? So they do work. Okay. Now,
You target like a certain date, like an inspection date or something like that.
I usually do earnest money or I usually figure if they're going to do the inspection objection, they're probably 10 days out. So I'll probably make it 10 days out. Because it gives the seller a sense of urgency to solve the issue with the other one, or they're bringing us in. Sometimes I've done it tighter than that because I don't want them to do the inspection. Because I don't want to automatically go into backup something because if it failed on inspection, they could have something major and now I'm just going to spend money on an inspection. So sometimes I want to get it done. So it depends on the situation, how much time you want to give them. I'm just typically not willing to sit for 30 or 40 days to see if that first deal ever closes.
And how long your buyer is comfortable waiting as well.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's like you said, if they're sitting there waiting for 30 days, they're not able to go out and get under contract on another property.
Yep.
They're stuck.
They're
So
stuck.
stuff, yes, because of a buyer, if the buyer and seller have signed the backup offer, technically the buyer has some obligation under a contract, so they should not be out shopping for houses.
Unless they actually have the ability to buy 2
Yes. Or 3.
or 3,
Okay.
or whatever.
All right, so then, whenever you see some of these funny little characters that you see right here in the next paragraph, that's usually a place where Damien's giving you instructions. So the first sentence of use TFC in the dates and deadlines table instead of MEC or specific date, and also use this clause. So he's telling you up in the dates and deadlines, instead of saying MEC plus 3 days or putting in a hard date, you need to put in TFC. So the rest of that paragraph you're going to include because this defines what TFC stands for. The term TFC means termination of first contract and is the date upon which the first contract is terminated and the buyer receives written notice that the above contingency has been removed and this contract is in full force and effect. Okay, so you got to put both paragraphs in without the instructions from Damien. Okay. Here's the other thing. If you are involved in a backup offer where the first one cancels and yours goes into effect, whether you're the seller or the buyer, somebody please do an amendment and put hard dates in. Because every deadline is going to be TFC plus 10, TFC plus 12, TFC. And who wants to count it? So do an amend and lock them down would be my best practice there. Questions on that one?
So we don't include that first sentence of the second paragraph, but we include the rest. That's
Right,
Damien's
this part right
instructions.
here that I just highlighted.
Yeah. Okay.
Do not include that. Those are Damien instructions. Right? But the rest of it, the term, because think about it from a contract perspective, you want it to explain what you're talking about. Okay,
Okay, now I read it.
got it?
All right.
Okay. Nicole, were you able to get the documents out of the chat or do I need to send it again?
I didn't get them out of the chat. If you could send them again, that'd be
All
awesome.
right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to email it to you because otherwise it gets snarky.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hmm? Let me figure out where I'm at now.
So remove the whole underline.
Okay, all right, next clause. This happens when you're the buyer. When the broker is the buyer. Buyer is a licensed real estate broker in the state of Colorado. Buyer may receive a portion of the commission and may be purchasing the property in anticipation of a future profit. So if you're buying it to flip, I would keep the last part of that sentence and maybe purchasing the property in anticipation of a future profit. If you're buying it for your personal residence, I would take that last part out. Okay. I mean, I guess we're all anticipating a future profit at some point in time. The key is you got to disclose yourself. If you're selling your personal property, seller is a licensed real estate broker in the state of Colorado. Okay. Broom clean. Okay. This is, if you're in a different, some people use them all the time. I don't know that I've ever used one, but it's not bad. Seller agrees to turn over the property at possession in a broom clean condition. Broom clean means the trash and personal property have been fully removed. Bathrooms and kitchen are clean. Carpets are vacuumed and all hard surfaces are clean. It does not mean they shampooed the carpets. It does not mean they washed the windows. Okay. There's a new one in here. I just discovered Damien, for those of you that have been around for a while, he added a bunch of new clauses in September. And so one of them is he's actually got us a professional clean one as well, which I kind of like. Okay. Buyer sale contingency, also known as a kick-out clause. So this is a clause that your seller might choose to use when a buyer is presenting an offer in which they must sell their existing property. Now, you kind of got to understand the market you're playing in. Okay, if I go back to 2021 and 2022, how many times, Jamie, were we accepting offers that were contingent from buyers?
You weren't.
Not often. It was a rarity. What is it like out there today? Anybody know?
It happens.
Yeah.
It's happening a lot more, right? If you've got a hotter property, you might decide to use this clause or you might not. Okay. But I want to make sure I go over it. So what a kick-out clause does, just in a high level, you're going to accept the offer from the buyer. It's contingent that the buyer sells their existing property. However, with a kick-out clause, the seller can go into the MLS and they can tag it under contract or pending, whichever the words is, accepting other, you can still advertise it when it's a kick-out clause. So then let's say you get another offering. Let's say you like the better offer. You're still under contract with buyer A, right? You can, if you did a counter offer with the kickout clause to buyer A, you can then notify buyer A they have a choice. They can either A, remove the sale contingency, which means if they terminate because they can't sell their house, they lose their earnest money. And they have a certain period of time to do that. If they remove it, then you stay with buyer A. Or buyer A can go, I got to keep that contingency in place. Contract automatically terminates. Buyer A gets their earnest money back and you accept the new offer from buyer B. That's what a kickout clause does. Okay. Don't use them a lot, right? Because either the market conditions are such previously that the market conditions were so hot, we didn't have to. Or B, right now, how many buyers are knocking on your doors? Not a lot, right? So you kind of have to figure out it's a strategy, everything is, right? So this is what you would write if you're going to execute a kick out clause. Buyer cannot qualify to purchase the property without selling buyer's property located at their address. Therefore, this contract is contingent upon the sale of buyer's property. See, they defined buyer's property with an address. Upon the earlier of seller providing written notice to buyer of seller's receipt of another acceptable offer on the property or a date, buyer will have X number of hours in which to send seller written notice that this contingency is waived. If the buyer does send said written notice to seller waiving this contingency, meaning the sale contingency, this contract will remain in full force and effect, and buyer waives buyer's right to terminate under new loan availability deadline. Buyer agrees that buyer's earnest money is forfeited if buyer fails to close on this contract due to buyer's property failing to close or because buyer fails to qualify for a loan to purchase the property. If buyer does not send said written notice to seller waiving this contingency, this contract will automatically terminate. So you got to be careful because your buyers need to understand. They're going to go, okay, well, take the contingency out because if I can't get my loan approved, then I'll just get out under loan approval. Well, guess what? That just got taken away too, didn't it? So it's written very well to prevent the game playing, right? But it's pretty clear. You guys understand the process, understand the meat of it.
I think so, but I do have one question. So is this only when another contract has come into play? Or is this, cause I'm just thinking, like, we had this conversation with the last sale, cause Lori's house was contingent. And the agent on her new house was saying, oh, well, let's make your earnest money hard. And I don't know if that's a similar situation as this.
Because she still could have terminated under sale contingency, but she still would have lost her earnest money if you made it non-refundable. Okay. When I use this clause, the few times I have, I don't use the part or a date. Okay. Because I could manipulate that with dates and deadlines. Okay.
Is this what you use like under any contingency when someone has to sell their property to then qualify to purchase the next one?
I might, but
What
I would
is
only
the
use it if I'm on the seller side. So if I'm on the buyer's side, I'm not going to put this in the offer. I'm going to be honest, I'm not, right? Because is this in my buyer's best interest? No, right? But if I'm the listing agent, I'm absolutely going to use it on a counter if the situation warrants doing a kickout clause. Right? I might use this for somebody who's saying, well, I can't get my house on the market for another 2 weeks. And, all of a sudden they're asking me to really extend my time to play ball with them. I might throw this in there because I might be able to sniff out another offer. I don't know. Right? So it's a dance, right? The other thing is if you're desperate for buyers and you're sitting on the market for 60 days and this is the first sniff of anything you've had, do you want to send a counter with a kick-out clause in it and have the buyer not sign it and they go pick a different house? Right? So like I said, everything's a strategy, but contractually, I want you to understand how it works.
I'm still a little confused on this.
Okay. So you're the listing agent. You get an offer. Okay. The offer is contingent on the buyer selling their house.
Mhm.
But you've had lots of other phone calls about your property. But you haven't gotten any offers yet, and you got a deadline, and your seller's going, I just want to get under contract. So you might be willing to work the contingency with buyer A, but you want to leave the door open to accept other offers. Okay, so now another offer comes strolling in that's not contingent, and it's an acceptable offer. Okay, you can now send a notice to buyer A that says, we've received another offer, 24 hours to remove your sale contingency. And if you're not willing to remove your sale contingency, we're terminating our contract and we'll give you your earnest money back. And then we're going to accept buyer B's offer.
And that can only happen if you have agreed to the buyer sale contingency, right?
Yes. So the offer from buyer A has an agreement that there's a sale contingency in it, but in my counter offer, I'm putting the kickout clause in. So I'm not signing buyer A's offer as it's written. I'm writing a counter offer, putting the kickout clause in there to protect my seller.
So is the kickout aspect where you can receive or accept a different offer that comes in that's not contingent?
As long as the buyer doesn't remove the contingency, yes. Buyer A has to be terminated before I can accept buyer B. So with the kickout clause in the counter offer to buyer A then has 24 hours to make a choice. They either A, remove the sale contingency and we keep moving forward with buyer A, or B, they don't remove the sale contingency, which at point in time, that contract terminates, we give them their earnest money back, and then we accept the offer from buyer B.
Gotcha. Is it likely though that they would even remove their contingency if they need to sell a property to qualify for the next house?
Depends on how far down the path they are and what their risk tolerance is. So I can tell you right now, we have a house in the coaching program that's under contract. We have the seller and we have a kickout clause with the buyer. The buyer wanted the sale contingency because they wanted to keep that option open. However, if the seller got another offer, they were very quick, ready, willing, and able to remove the contingency. So it depends on who your buyer is, Taylor. Right? Your first-time home buyers aren't going to be in that situation. Well, first-time home buyers aren't going to have a buyer contingency. But if you've got somebody that's doing a move up that's tight and they don't have the ability to qualify or other assets to use, then you could see a kickout clause coming back. We honestly don't use them that often. I'm just going to tell you that, but you need to know what they are. Partially because some people don't know how to explain them correctly. Did that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
Read through the clause a couple times. It really does help when you go back and read through it. All right. Any other questions? All right, buyer viewing contingency. We used this a ton in COVID.
Yeah.
Back when we couldn't show houses. We couldn't go show houses unless we were under contract, okay? So we used this a lot. People were buying sight unseen. So this one you're going to use this. It's going to be a sight unseen offer, okay? So buyer entered into this contract prior to viewing the property. Therefore, this contract is contingent upon buyer viewing and approving the property. In buyer's sole subjective discretion, on or before the viewing termination deadline. If seller does not receive buyer's written notice to terminate due to the buyer's disapproval of the property on or before the viewing termination deadline, buyer is deemed to have approved the property under this provision, and this contract will remain in full force and effect. This contingency is in addition to any other rights buyer has under the terms of this contract, including those rights under paragraph 10. Now, here's Damien's instruction thing again. He used a term that we don't have, right? Anybody ever seen a viewing termination deadline in your dates and deadlines? Nope, but you're going to add one. So there he's giving you the instruction to add it. Okay. Another place you could use this is that let's say you have a seller who has some health issues and they don't want a million people traipsing through their house. Okay. You could, as the listing agent, advertise, and then the buyer's agents would be putting this in. That would be another place that you could use it. It's not something we use very often. However, it's an option. Also, in this current market, how many of us have buyers who travel and all of a sudden they want to put in an offer on a house, and you go do a video tour of it and they say, let's write an offer, but I'm not going to be back for 2 weeks or 10 days or even the weekend. You could submit an offer and put this in there. And it would be another way to protect your buyer. Okay. Do you guys have any idea any of this existed? Some of it. Some of it. All right, here's one of the new ones. I am so excited about this one. Now, you guys can alter this to whatever makes sense, but here's the root of it. Seller agrees the property will be professionally cleaned in its entirety 48 hours prior to closing. This includes, but is not limited to, wiping the inside and outside of all cabinets and drawers, cleaning all surfaces, counters, windows, sills, all hard surface floors, and sweeping garage. All carpets must be professionally steam cleaned 48 hours prior to closing. All nail holes and picture hanging holes will be filled and painted to match existing wall finish. All personal property not included in this transaction, as well as any trash, will also be removed from the property prior to closing. Now, maybe you change the timeline, especially if you have a post-closing occupancy agreement, right? Maybe there's not a garage. Maybe you don't care about the nail holes, right? I think that was probably pushing the envelope a little bit in the markets that we've seen, but you might need it. So I love the fact that that's there because it clearly defines what professional cleaning is. Okay. All right.
Are these all new from Danny directly?
I'm sorry, what?
Are these all directly Danny's?
Yes.
So they're in the CTM.
They're in the clauses of CTM.
Sorry, the first part.
That's okay. There's also emails in there. I chose not to bring those in here, but if you go out and look at the clause catalog, he's also given you email stuff that you can use, like if you're communicating with your client about title or all kinds of stuff. So I encourage you to go out there and poke around when you don't have anything else to do on cold, snowy days. Okay. Escalation. An escalation clause to me is like the eBay clause. Okay. You're going to offer $1, but you're willing to pay $3 and you'll beat any other bid by 50 cents. Okay. Does everybody understand that? Up to a max of $3, except we're going to use real numbers. Okay. All right, here we go. The purchase price will automatically be raised by X amount over the net purchase price offered by any higher bona fide arm's length offer upon buyer's receipt of a copy of the higher offer. Net purchase price means the purchase price offered by the bona fide purchaser less any and all concessions or other credits which reduce the proceeds received by the seller. That's a big line right there. However, buyer's purchase price will not exceed Y. Buyer may allocate the additional purchase price between new loan and cash at closing as directed by buyer's lender. Additionally, both buyer and seller agree to execute and amend extend with the new purchase price if required by buyer's lender. Honestly, I don't even use the part if required by buyer's lender. And honestly, what I really want is that I just want a counter offer for the new purchase price. So I might even take that paragraph off and working with the listing agent, I would just tell them, send me a counter for the new amount. Once the buyer and seller are under contract, this clause terminates and is removed from the contract. So let's say you offer a house at $500,000 and you do a escalation of $1,200 over and above anybody else, and your max is $530. If they don't have any other offers and they sign your offer, how much did you just pay for the house? $500,000, right? So the minute it's signed, that escalation terminates. So if I was going to write this, I mean, I give these to you just exactly the way Damien does, but let's be honest, I would remove that entire sentence about the amend extend. I would grab it in a counter offer. Okay. Questions on that paragraph? We're still seeing some of those today. Yes, Taylor.
Why do you prefer a counter offer over an amend extend?
Because once the buyer and seller are under contract, this clause terminates. So if I signed it at 500, then I'm going to send you an amend extend later. Doesn't feel right to Margaret. So I think from a best practice perspective, right? If I'm working with Liz and she's the listing agent, she calls me up and she says, hey, Margaret, we're going to execute on your escalation clause. And so your new purchase price is $515. I'm going to say, great, send me over a counter offer and we'll sign it. I think it's cleaner, it's got less risk in it and less confusion and fighting later. So from a best practice perspective, I would rather just do the counter offer. Now, one of the questions I get all the time is, well, don't they have to prove it? Well, we asked them to, but if they send the counter and you sign it, who cares? Right? And I've had some agents who will send the whole offer. Some of them will redact the client, the buyer's names and the agent name. Some of them will just send me a screenshot of the financial pieces of it. You, as a buyer's agent, you just have to decide what you're comfortable with. And at the end of the day, how bad does your buyer want the house? Okay. All right. I do not know why I would ever use this clause, but evidently somebody has needed it. Extension for loan delay. If closing is delayed due to the buyer's lender, the closing date and possession date may be extended by buyer for up to X number of days by written notice by buyer to seller no later than closing. I guess if you don't trust your lender, you might put that in there. Okay.
Maybe you were trying to do a super quick close, but then you're not sure if your lender can do it.
I don't know.
No, I don't like it either, but.
Yeah. All right. Home warranty. You guys, we use this. Now here's the place. This clause is written under contract to buy and sell, but you could use it in an amendment. You could use it in an inspection resolution. So the clause can be, some of these clauses can be used in multiple places. Home warranty. Seller agrees to furnish a name of the company home warranty at seller or buyer's expense, well, probably sellers, at closing at a cost not to exceed X amount of dollars with a term of whatever the time is. So if you're the buyer's agent and you're asking for a home warranty, you probably know the name of the home warranty company. You already know how much it's going to cost and what the term's going to be. So fill it in. If I'm the listing agent doing an inspection resolution, I already know which one I'm going to offer you. Okay. Home warranty waiver. Again, this is one I'm not sure when I would use it, but I don't think it's necessarily bad. Buyer has been advised that home warranties may be available for purchase to insure the property. However, buyer has decided against purchasing a home warranty.
Doesn't Damien talk about home warranties in the advisory?
It's in the contract. The contract to buy and sell talks about home warranties. So not saying I would use them all. Okay, this one's interesting. It's a new one. I need to talk to Damien so I understand it better. So you're all going to have to just deal with me. Okay, inclusions, furniture and furnishings. Somebody's got one they're working on right now where there's like a laundry list of things the buyers want. Anyway, I don't know who it is. I don't think it's any of you guys, but an itemized list of the included and excluded furniture and furnishings will be provided by seller to buyer no later than blank calendar days after the mutual execution of the contract and become a part of the contract, and will amend paragraphs 253 and 26. Buyers has the right to review and object to said itemized list on or before the inspection objection deadline. Taylor, this could have worked for Chris, right? In the event buyer's objection is received prior to the inspection objection deadline and the parties have not agreed in writing to a resolution to set objections on or before the inspection resolution deadline, this contract will terminate on the inspection resolution deadline unless seller receives buyer's written withdrawal of the buyer's objection before such termination. If the buyer does not object on or before the inspection objection deadline, then buyer accepts the itemized list of inclusions. That is a mouthful.
Yeah. So
Okay.
basically he took all of this exclusion, inclusion stuff and tied it to inspection, objection, and resolution.
So what it is, and Taylor had the perfect seller for this. He kept saying, well, I'll sell whatever they want in here. But then when you'd start to get somebody kicking the tires, he'd go, well, I don't know. So so normally I would teach you, right, that if your buyer is buying a laundry list of personal property, you submit the personal property agreement with the offer, right? But in this time, there's no clarity on what it is. So in this case, the seller is saying, after we've gone under contract, okay, Jeff, I'm going to give you this for this much money. And I'm going to send you that list. And you're going to get that list no later than X number of calendars. So maybe 3 calendars after we go under contract, I'm going to send you the list of the personal property I'm willing to sell to you. Then you have the right up until the inspection objection deadline to say, I agree with the personal property or I don't. If you don't, you have to include it as part of your inspection objection.
Hmm.
And then you negotiate it just like you would a sewer line repair. Very
And I'm like,
interesting.
no, I really have to have a pool table or whatever it is.
Exactly, right? That's part of the negotiations, right? So when I first read it, I immediately thought, when would I use this? And then as I'm sitting here and Taylor's at the top of my screen, I'm like going, the guy
Yeah.
out there, right? I don't
Um,
know I don't know that you guys are gonna see this a lot, right? Here's the thing with this class. You're gonna be introduced to a lot of things you're never gonna use. But here's what's gonna happen. You've been here, you read them, you come back the next time I teach the class, and then you go, what about if, or you get into a situation, you go, I'll bet there's a class for that. At least now you have some kind of place for us to go.
Quick question on that. To be able to find, like, is there a place you can get to the clause catalog without being inside of a document or contract?
I've never found one. Although I just gave you a printed copy of it.
Yeah, I'm looking more for like the email, like those email things.
Yeah, it'd be
like,
nice. It would be
You
nice.
know, like the email.
I just go into a template, and then I never save them, but yeah.
Yeah, it would just be nice if there's like a little external link or something where you.
If it's something you're gonna use a lot of, I would literally, what I do is I go in and I click, and then I copy them all and I throw them into a Word document.
Okay,
And then I cleaned them up. Like what I gave you guys, I spent about an hour cleaning this up.
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Somebody else had a question.
how does this play into like a bill of sale? Because wouldn't furniture fall under a different negotiation piece within the contract?
Well, I think that's what paragraphs 253 and 26 do.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
therefore that becomes part of your personal property bill of sale at the closing table.
Gotcha.
Good question. All right, insurance availability. This is another new one. If the property insurance availability premium or requirements previously approved by the buyer pursuant to section 10.5 change, buyer has a right to terminate under 24.1 on or before the closing date, provided buyer delivers a copy of the original insurance quote along with a new insurance quote showing changes in the premium or requirements, or a copy of a denial verifying insurance for the property is no longer available. Oh my God, in a million places, right? Like, think about it. And here's the thing, when your buyers are out getting insurance, they need to lock it with the insurance carrier, not just get a quote, because if they lock it, this can't happen. But you're right, Jamie. Like, you think about mountain property, right? How quickly could you get a quote and then all of a sudden the insurance carrier says, oh, we're not covering property up over there anymore because there's too high of a risk of fire. Or they double the premium and it's no longer affordable to the buyer. Or even down here, right, with some of the condos and townhomes, right? So this is a clause that I think makes sense if you guys are writing on off properties where the property insurance might get questionable. Or what about the house with the 12-year-old roof?
Yeah, that's what I think.
Right? The insurance carrier says yes. Find out it's a 12-year-old roof. Seller won't do anything to fix it. How do you protect your buyers? I think this is it.
Yeah.
So great new clause. I wish we would have known about it, but it's all good. All right. Oh, where am I? Okay, local transfer tax. I love this clause. The local transfer tax referenced in paragraph 15.4 of this contract is X. It's either a dollar amount or percent of the purchase price that is payable to somebody. If you go look in the contract to buy and sell, there's a local transfer tax, and all it says is local transfer tax will be paid by somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
But does the somebody know how much it ever is?
No.
No. So what a great way to put it in the contract, right? So again, something new. We've not had it before. There's another one in here too that's like that. Okay. Oh, wasn't that long ago. We threw the words appraisal gap coverage around like it was chocolate ice cream and everybody knew what it was.
Yeah.
Now I don't know the last time I heard the word appraisal gap coverage. However, at some point it's going to come back in our world. There's no doubt in my mind. I've seen it come and go over the last 10 years. There are 3 different clauses that are written for low appraisal. And I'm gonna stop Stacy so she can't answer the questions. Okay, so the first one, it says low appraisal, buyer brings some cash and there's a price reduction. In the event the appraisal states that the appraised value is less than the purchase price, buyer agrees that buyer will bring up to X amount of dollars of additional cash to closing to make up the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price. This is known as buyer contribution. Buyer represents that buyer has already confirmed with the buyer's lender that the buyer contribution will not adversely impact the buyer's loan. If the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price is greater than the buyer contribution, the purchase price will be automatically reduced to the appraised value plus the buyer contribution. The parties agree to execute any amend extend or document required by the buyer's lender or closing company to document the change in the purchase price. Okay, so, and then down here is all Damien, please don't put it in the contract. So, can someone explain to me what that just said? Anybody give me an example? Go for it, Taylor.
So isn't it basically saying if there's a low appraisal, buyer will bring their buyer contribution up to pretty much appraised value reduced by whatever buyer contribution? Like, aren't they meeting in the middle?
Kind of. So let's pretend that your agreed purchase price is $650,000. And in this contract, the buyer says that they are willing to go 10,000 over. Okay, following me? So what did I say? It was six what? 650. So if the appraisal comes in at 640 or more, the buyer's paying 650. We all agree with that? Okay. But what happens if the appraisal comes in at 630? Now what happens?
640.
Yes. So the purchase price goes to 640 because the buyer is only willing to add 10,000 to it. So the seller's agreeing up front that they're willing to drop the price. Now,
Why put a limit on that? Wouldn't you, I mean, it's written that they just basically keep dropping the price. Wouldn't you want a limit on that if you were the seller?
that's why I would never use this one. Because if you have a lousy appraiser, say some appraiser comes in and hits this house in 640, 630, 650 could be right. And they come in and do it at 600, you just sold the house for 610.
Yeah.
Right? So as a listing agent, if any of you use this on me, I would counter it with a different gap. I want to be able to negotiate that difference.
On the buyer's side though,
On the buyer side, it's a sweet deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you're still saying I'll come in X amount of dollars, but your limit, you're.
Right.
But it does say up to list price too, though, right? Like, cause you've agreed to 650 and it comes in at 645, you don't have to pay 655.
Right. You're
You
correct.
still only have to pay the
This only is an issue if the appraisal is less. This goes into effect if the appraisal is less, right? That you can't automatically raise. So think about it, right? Take appraisal gap coverage out of everything. If you buy a house at 650 and it appraises at 660, does the price just go up?
No.
No. So your purchase price can never go up in this scenario. But what this low appraisal does, the first version, is the buyer's willing to say, I'll bring X amount over appraisal, but if the gap is more than this, Mr. Seller, you're automatically dropping the purchase price. Okay?
Yep.
Got it, Zoomland? All right, thanks for the thumbs up. Those really do help me. All right, low appraisal, buyer price reduction. This one's even better. In the event the appraisal states that the appraised value is less than the purchase price, upon seller's receipt of a copy of such appraisal or lender verification, the purchase price will be automatically reduced to the appraised value as long as the purchase price is not less than blank, minimum appraised value. The parties agree to execute any amend extend or document required by the buyer's lender. Should the appraisal state that the appraised value is less than the minimum appraised value, this paragraph does not apply and each party will have these rights specified in 6.2 or otherwise in the contract. So this is kind of what Jeff, what you were saying, right? You're gonna put a protection into your seller, right? So if I go back to the 650, maybe I say, okay, I'm willing to drop the price to 630, but I'm not going below. Right? So that caps how low the appraisal can automatically be dropped, or the purchase price can be dropped if the appraisal comes in low. So you could, Jeff, combine 1 and 2 in the right scenario. You could pull components of each of those. Okay, so the number 2 automatically drops the price to either the appraised value or whatever the minimum is in this contract, in this agreement. But again, on the buyer side, I don't know. Do I want to just say that up front? If I offered 650 and you say, well, I'll only drop the price automatically to 640, but what if the price came into 625? I'm now committed to buying it at 640. I might not want that either, right? Don't like it. I'm not liking either of these. Anybody else feeling good about it?
Hang on. Alright.
You still have the negotiation rights. You're right, Stacey.
I thought this was, yeah,
But I don't know a seller that's going to accept these.
right.
Okay. Here's the one we use the most. Okay. This is the most common. I will tell you this, most agents didn't know how to write it. So for those of you that were listing agents and I was reviewing your contracts in 2021 and 2022, this was the number one thing we countered because people couldn't write escalation clauses correctly or appraisal gaps correctly. In the event the appraisal states that the appraised value is less than the purchase price, buyer agrees that buyer will bring up to X amount of dollars of additional cash to closing to make up the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price. Again, buyer's contribution. Buyer represents that buyer's already confirmed with the buyer's lender that the buyer contribution will not adversely impact the buyer's loan. If the difference between the appraised value and the purchase price is greater than the buyer contribution, this paragraph does not apply and each party will have those rights specified in paragraph 6.2 or otherwise in the contract. So we've offered 650. If it appraises at 640 or more, we're paying 650. We're all good to go, right? If it appraises for 625, we're all having a conversation. We're going to figure out what the right answer is. Okay? Questions?
You keep saying if it appraises at 640 for a list price of 650, that you're good to go. Why would that be the case?
Because in my example, I'm bringing $10,000 of additional cash.
So if you were to write that in, you're pretty much like if it appraises at 640, you still have to purchase it at 650?
You do if you put an appraisal gap coverage in of $10,000.
Yes, but outside of appraisal gap coverage, that's not how that works, right?
Correct. If you
okay.
don't have appraisal gap coverage and you're at 650 and it appraises at 640 with no appraisal gap coverage, you're negotiating or terminating.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other questions?
These were really only in play when it was such a strong
Mhm.
seller's.
When it was super
market.
competitive, although
So-
and honestly, right now, I mean, it's very rare that we're seeing appraisals coming in under, although we did just have one the other day. Vanessa had one, but most of the appraisals right now are coming in over because look at what the market, right? The appraisals always look in the rear view mirror. Well, when you've got a market that's flat or slightly declining, the rear view mirror is going to be higher than what the current market conditions are. You know, we switch into the new year, it's very common in the spring season that the rear view mirror is less than what the market conditions are, which is when these always come into play. Okay. All right. Private transfer fee. Private transfer fee due to a private entity such as association, community association, developer, foundation referenced in paragraph 15.6 of this contract is for the following entity. Blank in the, okay, did I copy that wrong? Is for the following entity. Oh, it puts the amount. So you put in the name. So the name of the HOA or developer in the total amount of X amount of dollars or percent of the purchase price. So again, they're disclosing what that private transfer fee is going to be. Hello, Green Valley Ranch.
Right.
Right. So again, we never had this before where we knew where it was, what it was. Hopefully listing agents are telling us that up front so we can now start putting these clauses in. So now the buyer and seller fully have it disclosed as part of the contract. Okay. It's very nice. Who knew those existed? Okay. I have no idea oh, maybe I do understand this. For a minute, I didn't understand this one, but I think I do now. Seller agrees to provide buyer with seller's proposed inspection resolution on or before the proposed inspection resolution deadline. Which at first I was like, huh, we already have an inspection resolution deadline. But now I'm gonna pick on Liz. If I'm the buyer who was buying her property that we recently went through mold, asbestos, roof, water leaks, everything possible that you could find. If I knew that going in, that this was gonna be a complicated inspection resolution, I could see writing an offer that says, give me your proposal first, and then let's start talking. So all it's doing is adding another date between the inspection objection and the inspection resolution. I know, it's not, I see all kinds of confusion, right, and squinchy faces, but it's gonna be on those properties that you're like going, this could be something that we're gonna have to work through and it's gonna take a couple versions. Right? So this is a proposed inspection resolution, not the final inspection resolution. So I think it's gonna be rare, but now you know it exists.
At this point, though, if you're not coming to a resolution, you can change the date of that, the
Absolutely.
resolution, right, and just do an addendum, so, okay.
I'm not saying it's something I'm gonna use a lot of,
Right.
but again, having the awareness that you could throw that other date in there with the right property is just another tool in your tool bit. Okay? All right, seller replacement home. This contract is contingent upon seller closing on the purchase of a replacement home acceptable to seller on or before X date. Seller has the right to terminate effective upon buyer's receipt of seller's notice to terminate on or before conditional purchase deadline if such property is not purchased and closed by such deadline. If buyer does not receive seller's notice to terminate on or before conditional purchase deadline, seller waives any right to terminate under this provision. Seller's broker is authorized and instructed to advise buyer as to status on seller's purchase of replacement home. So again, not something we've used very often, but if you go back into some of those past markets, sellers were like, yeah, I'd love to sell, but what if I can't find anywhere to live? Right? So you could use this one, but it would get tricky because one, they have to be closed. You might have to reword that a little bit. And also, what buyer is going to spend $500 to $700 on inspections and an appraisal only to have the seller terminate on? So it's going to be a very unique scenario that you're going to use it. But again, know that you could use this as a tool in your toolkit if you've got a seller who's worried about not finding a replacement home. Okay? Huh?
Yeah, it just gets me, imagine that'd be a tough sell today.
Oh, in today's market? Absolutely. Yes, thank you. Okay. Septic systems. Okay, so if you get involved in properties that have septic systems, most of us don't work with them a whole lot. I've gotten pretty good at them over the years, so has Bob and Charles. Talk to us, but some counties require what's called a use permit when you transfer property with a septic system, and some of them don't. So if you are in a county, and how do you find out? Google is your friend. You type in county septic transfer process, right? So Jefferson County, Park County, Weld County, Boulder County, they all have their own rules, but it's very, you Google that, you're going to find out the answers very quick if a use permit is required. Most of them are. I believe Weld County is the only one that doesn't, but we'd have to double check that.
What was the Google?
Google Jefferson County or whatever your county name is, septic transfer process, or whatever you're calling it, okay? So at least 3 visits. If you have a property where a septic use permit is not required to transfer the property, at least 3 days prior to the inspection objection deadline, seller at seller's sole expense will provide buyer with the following: a copy of the original septic use permit issued by the applicable county Department of Health or applicable governmental agent, and its septic inspection report completed within the last blank number of days, so you could say 30, 45, whatever you want to do, and produced from reputable private contractor acceptable to buyer. And evidence that the septic tank has been pumped within the last X number of days. So if you don't have to get the use permit, that's what you're going to want to put in additional provisions. Most of us are going to be used the next one. Paragraph 10.6.1.5 is amended as follows. 1, the term septic use permit includes any document required by the local health department regarding the septic system to transfer ownership of the property to the buyer regardless of the name or title. Number 2, in the event seller is required to make repairs to the septic system in excess of X amount of dollars in order for the county to issue the septic use permit, this contract will automatically terminate within 3 business days of the seller being notified of such repair requirements unless the parties enter into a mutual agreement. Here's what I'm going to tell you on that. This is Damien's clause. Kevin actually has written a better one. So if you get a septic, please contact me and I will help you give you the right one. You guys don't run into this a lot, so it's not like you're going to use it every day. Okay. SSA definition. SSAs, I hope they don't come back, although I have a feeling. Short sales. Does anybody know what a short sale is? What is it, Jeff?
It's when they don't have enough money to cover an equity to cover the loan. So there's basically a short on when they sell the house.
The amount to pay off the liens plus the cost to sell is less than what they can get market value. And they don't have the cash to bring the money to close. So when that happens, welcome 2008 through 2011. The term SSA means the date upon which seller has received all written short sale acceptances as defined in the short sale addendum. Seller shall notify buyer within 24 hours of receiving this final short sale acceptance. If you get into short sales, we need to get Kevin involved right away, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side. So let me know and we'll work through those. I've written one offer on a short sale property. And we found a house and 2 years later, they still hadn't gotten through that one. And that was in current times. Okay. Walkthrough. Again, I kind of like this. Although I would probably tweak it. Seller agrees that buyer's rights under 18.4 will include, at buyer's option, the right to conduct both a preliminary walkthrough of the property to be scheduled 7 days prior to closing and a subsequent or final walkthrough of the property just prior to closing. When would you use that?
Maybe tenants are moving out or.
Like repairs are expected.
Massive repairs, right? It could be a tenant move out. Exactly, Stacy, right? Maybe the house was a hoarder house and you really couldn't see everything, right? So again, I don't know that it's something you're going to use on a regular basis, but if you're buying a certain property that you're like going, I think we're going to want to double check a few things a week before and then we'll do it again. You might just know that it's out there. Okay.
With new builds, you pretty much have the right to go into a walkthrough anytime, right? Not.
Kind of depends on the builder. When I'm dealing with new construction, I usually try and do a pre-drywall inspection with my inspector, and then they're going to do your blue tapes and all of that stuff anyway.
Okay.
And they're not going to let you write an amendment to their contract anyway.
Got it.
That's how they work. Okay. I do not know when this class is supposed to end, but I know it's not 3 o'clock in the afternoon either. Okay, well, at least 3 days prior to the inspection objection deadline, seller at seller's sole expense shall provide buyer with the following. So if you got a well, you can put this in here. Copies of the well permit, completion report, and statement of beneficial use on the groundwater well of the property is issued by the Colorado Division of Water Resources. Number 2, a bacteriological water test conducted on the groundwater well completed within the last X number of days and produced by the County Department of Health or reputable private contractor acceptable to buyer. Here's one of Damien's notes. If it's not a permitted well, that's not when you're going to use that clause and you need to talk to leadership. What we see right now in our current environment, the well is up to the buyer to inspect. So typically the buyer would do the well test to check for bacteria and what's going on and what the production levels are. However, market changes much more. You might throw that in at the seller. Okay. So again, know that it's out there. Okay. That's all the clauses about contract to buy and sell. And we're only an hour in. Okay. These are starting going fast. Okay. Closing instructions. I'm going to skip that one because honestly, we don't do it that way. Okay. Exclusive right to buy. Geographic location. This one's interesting. This buyer listing contract only applies to property purchased by the buyer within X number of miles of a geographic location. In the event buyer purchases a property located outside of the geographic location, this buyer listing contract does not apply and brokerage firm is not entitled to its success fee. However, despite such purchase, the buyer listing contract will remain in full force and effect for any property buyer purchases within the geographic location during the listing period. Kind of a head scratcher the first time you read through it, right? For those of you that have been through contracts a little bit, but I've got an example. So Jamie, who just left the room, had a buyer who they initially were looking in the Conifer, Evergreen, Jefferson County area. Okay. However, then their situation changed, and next thing you know, they were also looking up in Leadville. So had we put this clause in here that said the buyer listing contract only applies to property purchased by the buyer, you, instead of saying within miles of a geographic area, you could say purchased by buyer within Jefferson County. If the buyer buys property somewhere else, I get nothing. Go have fun, go use that other agent. But this one still stays in effect in case you buy something in Jefferson County. Okay, or you could do within 10 miles of the intersection of I-25 and I-70, or whatever your scenario is, right? Because sometimes we have those buyers that are like, well, I'd consider here, but I also wouldn't mind living in Durango. Well, none of you are going to go to Durango. No, Jeff's like, oh no, not even me, right? So, but you could have a, right? But you could have something that's within X number of miles of, you know, pick a geographic location, and anything outside that they can use a different agent. Now I'm going to tell you as a coach, for those of you that I coach, you better be getting a referral agreement.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? But again, what a great tool for some of those buyers who they're in and out of areas that we're not comfortable playing in. Just in a thought. All right, lease option, lease purchase. This one's interesting, and I don't know. To me, this first paragraph is a Damien thing. Again, this is a new one that he wrote, and there's the same thing under the sellers. But you know, sometimes sellers or buyers will ask us about lease purchase or purchase to own or lease option transactions. I think some of you have asked me this question recently. These transactions are very much more complicated than an ordinary real estate transaction. Payment to the seller is deferred. Closing is usually long after contract signing. Conveyance of title to buyer is deferred, and each transaction has its own challenges. The state of Colorado does not endorse, forms, or condone brokers drafting lease purchase or lease option contracts. So if you have a client who wants to do a lease purchase, you need to stay out of it. In the event the buyer does decide to enter into a lease purchase or lease option contract, buyer agrees to retain a Colorado licensed attorney to represent buyer and to draft the appropriate paperwork. If buyer insists on moving forward with a lease purchase or lease option contract and is not represented by an attorney, then this buyer listing contract terminates and brokerage firm is entitled to a termination fee of whatever you want to charge, due within 3 days of brokerage firm giving notice of such termination. So if you have a buyer who starts in the very early stages, starts talking to you about lease options, that first paragraph is going to say, look, I can't do it for you. That's out of my thing. You got to fire an attorney to do that. And they go, okay, well, I was just curious, but if we find one, I might consider it. Then you might put that clause into your exclusive right to buy to protect you, and you can charge them a termination fee if you want to. Think about it. You run around showing them 20 homes, and then they go buy a lease purchase and they have to use an attorney, and you don't get paid. So this is a clause to protect you. Okay. Rebate to buyer. Broker agrees to rebate X amount of dollars of the success fee to buyer, provided A, the entire success fee is being paid by the seller or the listing brokerage firm, and 2, buyer's rebate is fully disclosed to buyer's lender and is on the settlement statement and or closing disclosure at closing. Typically where you see this is we are doing the buy and the sell, and the party says, well, gee, Jeff, you're getting both sides of the transaction. Can't you cut me a deal? Okay. Instead of just flat out reducing your listing fee, which is what most of us want to do first, I would do a rebate to the buyer or seller, and I would only give them the rebate on the second closing. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to reduce your compensation on the listing agreement and then they never buy with you. Hi, my name's Margaret. I got caught by that once. Fool me once, not twice. Okay. All right, referral fee. I don't use this, but I think You could. So if you have an exclusive right to buy and it's a referral that you got from somebody outside of the area, this is just a way to disclose to the buyer that this is going on. So brokerage firm agrees to pay a referral fee of whatever your is, 25% of the success fee received by brokerage firm to, what's the name of the brokerage firm, for the benefit of the name of the broker, provided referring brokerage firms and referring brokers' real estate licenses are in good standing with the state in which the referring brokerage firm and referring broker are licensed to do business. So I do business back and forth in Iowa. So if my friend Curtis sent it to me, I'd say brokerage firm agrees to pay a referral fee of 25% to Keller Williams Legacy Group for the benefit of Curtis Hartsock, providing referring brokerage firm and referring brokers real estate license are good standing. This way the buyer knows that, hey, Curtis is getting a kickback from me.
You don't have to put it in here though.
You don't. So, but again, it's another disclosure. What you got, Taylor?
If you get a referral from someone that's saying like the commercial world or not even in real estate at all, what do referral fees look like there?
So first of all, you can't pay a referral fee to someone who doesn't have a real estate license. If they're a commercial broker, I don't really know. I don't know what those, I don't know what's common in that area. Whatever you, just like everything in real estate, it's negotiable, right? I'm starting to see 30 and 35% in residential referrals back and forth. It's a lot. You go to family reunion, you see people running around, we pay 40% referral fee. Happy to send them to them. Okay. Okay, team clause. None of you are on a team. So here's what I'm gonna say. If you're on a team, you better know how to fill out the team clause. Termination. The buyer listing contract between the buyer, the broker, and the brokerage firm is terminated, effective immediately. Brokerage firm and broker hereby waive any and all right to commission or fees from buyer. Buyer releases broker and brokerage firm from any and all responsibility, obligations, and claims related to the buyer listing contract. That would actually go in and amend extend to your listing contract. Okay, transaction coordinator authorization. Okay, I've got a variation on this theme. Buyer understands that the name of your transaction coordinator is an unlicensed assistant and will be helping broker through this transaction. Buyer authorizes coordinator to receive buyer's personal information. The broker is solely responsible for paying the coordinator. Here's the thing. In our office, we have 2 transaction coordinators that probably support, and of the agents that use them, they're the only 2 TCs that I'm aware of. Andrea, who is my daughter, is unlicensed. So if you use Andrea, this is what you would use. Trevor Kolep is licensed. So if you're using Trevor, you would need to change the word unlicensed to licensed. Okay? All right, that's the end of the exclusive right to buy. Is this a 2:30 end?
Yeah.
Woo, okay, let's cruise. Inspection. Credit for inspection items. In lieu of inspection items, buyer will receive blank dollars of seller concessions at closing. Now, if you're only doing seller concessions, you're really just going to do an amend extend and you're going to change that word. So talk to me. Okay. Inspection waiver. Buyer understands the buyer has the right to inspect the property prior to the inspection objection. Deadline under the terms of the contract. However, buyer has decided against having the property inspected. That's a good one for you guys as buyer's agents to cover your backside. And then this is Davian's example of repairing inspection items. I like the top part. I don't like the bottom part. At least blank days prior to closing, seller will have the following work performed in a professional and lawful manner. And then where he's got all these little things right here, that's where you would write out what you want done. And then this is too much. It sounds too much like an attorney and everybody freaks out about it. Okay. Exclusive right to sell. 1031 exchanges. The property is an investment property for seller. Therefore, seller is advised to research doing a 1031 exchange with competent legal and or tax counsel prior to entering into a purchase contract for the property. Seller is also advised to seek guidance from a qualified 1031 intermediary. So if you know you're selling a rental property for the seller, I would put this in your listing agreement because it is a great thing because now you can show contractually you've talked to them about 1031 exchanges. We have a lot of people out there who have become accidental landlords. And accidental landlords don't understand the rules. So by using this, they can't come back and say, Arden, you're in trouble because now I have to pay this huge amount of capital gains because you never told me I could have taken that money as a 1031 exchange and reinvested it and avoided the capital gains. So you're a bad person. Put this in your exclusive right to sell. Guess what? Well, I did disclose it. You signed it. Okay. So I think that's a great one. I was really happy to see that one. Exclusion to listing. Cannot tell you how many times I hear, well, Margaret, my niece Susie has said they want to buy our house. So, you know, what can we do so that we don't, if Susie wants to buy it, then we don't have to do this with you. Here's your clause. It is agreed that in the event seller accepts a written contract for the sale and purchase of the property from Susie's name and notifies broker in writing on or before a date, neither the broker nor the brokerage firm will be entitled to any sale commission on said sale. Seller will submit a copy of the executed contract to the broker as evidence of said contract. Furthermore, broker's duties under the seller listing contract will be suspended until such time as the contract closes, terminates, or is canceled. Upon termination or cancellation, the broker will resume broker duties under the seller listing contract. I like that one. So if you run into the case where they go, well, Susie or the neighbor or somebody says they want to buy it and they think they want to do FSBO with that person, this is a clause you can put in your listing contract that gives them a certain amount of time to get it done. And if they happen to, your listing agreement still stays in play. So if it falls apart, now you can start marketing and go do your job.
Right.
If it closes, no harm, no foul.
Right.
So it's a great clause. Okay, lease option. This is exactly the same as the buyer one we already talked about. The only difference is it changes the word from buyer to seller. So next. O&E and TBD reimbursement. If any of you ask your sellers for $5 reimbursement for your O&E, come see me first and I'll pay you. However, TBDs. A TBD title commitment is one that you actually order the title commitment before you have a buyer. I've done this once, and the reason I did it was that my uncle owned a property up in the mountains, and I knew there was a bunch of old mines and easements and other things on the property. So I wanted to get ahead of it if there was anything that was going to cause us a problem. And up in some of those counties, it takes the title companies forever to do the searches. So you can order what's called a TBD. And so by putting this clause in your listing agreement, the seller is authorizing you to order the TBD and they will reimburse you in the event you don't close. Okay, so seller authorizes broker to order a TBD title commitment for the benefit of seller as long as the fee for said TBD title commitment does not exceed. So you just need to ask your title company how much it's going to cost. Seller agrees to reimburse broker the cost of said TBD title commitment within 3 days of receiving a copy of the invoice from the broker. So in practice, I probably wouldn't give them the invoice until I know we're not going to sell the property and my listing agreement's expired.
In that case, when you order that TBD title commitment, they're wanting payment for that right then.
I got billed after the fact. I had 45 days to pay it. And once I
So
went under
then-
contract, the title company worked with me.
I was gonna say, so then do they charge you again when they go into contract, or do they like?
Nope, you're just prepaying the owner's title policy. Yep. All right. Referral fee. This is exactly the same as it was under the buyer, just for the seller instead. Short sale coordinator authorization. Okay, so if you have a seller with a short sale, you're going to want a short sale coordinator. This is somebody who's an expert in this. I don't even know if they exist anymore, but they used to. Seller understands that a coordinator with their name is an unlicensed assistant and will be helping broker to try to obtain short sale approval from the seller's lender to sell the property. Seller authorized coordinator receives seller's personal information and to contact seller's lender on seller's behalf. Seller further agrees to provide broker and coordinator information necessary to obtain a short sale. The broker is solely responsible for paying the coordinator. If we, God forbid, ever that comes back, we're going to start seeing some of our transaction coordinators also become short sale coordinators. Solar panels. I kind of like this one. There are solar panels on the property. Seller represents that seller either owns with no loan or owns with a loan against the solar panels or leases, whichever is applicable, the solar panels. Seller agrees to cooperate with all efforts to obtain all information about the solar panels, because here's the problem. If you call up as the agent, some of the solar companies will say, I can't talk to you.
Right.
So this gives the seller notice up front. You have an expectation that they're going to help you.
So you would put this as a buyer's agent in the CVS?
No, this
Where
is
do you put
exclusive.
this?
These are
Oh.
exclusive right to sell
It's
clauses.
the right to sell.
So you are a listing agent writing up your exclusive right to sell,
Okay.
and you're saying there are solar panels on the property. Seller represents that seller is leasing the solar
Gotcha.
panels. Seller agrees to cooperate with all efforts to obtain all information about the panels.
Got
Okay? Team clause. It's pretty much the same as the buyer one, and none of you are on team, so who cares? Okay? The termination. Pretty much the same as the one that was the exclusive right to buy, except to change the word to seller. Okay? Transaction coordinator authorization, pretty much the same as the buyer one, except it changed buyer to seller. I knew I'd get through this. Variable commission. I am so excited about this clause. You guys, this is my absolute, I'm gonna like literally send Damien an email and say thank you for this one. Because so many of you have been asking me how to write them, and now I don't have to. And besides, he did it better than I do. In the event, broker also represents the buyer in the sale of the property. The success fee referenced in section 7.1.1 will be reduced to or increased to X amount upon the closing of the transaction to said buyer. Okay, I am so excited about this clause, I can't stand it. Okay, so let's pretend we're all in the same brokerage firm, right? Yep. Okay, so let's pretend that I'm writing my exclusive right to sell, and the total compensation is going to be 6%, and the sellers agreed to pay 2.8% to the buyer's agent. Okay, so my fee, so on the listing side, I would get 3.2, right? However, I said to the seller, if I bring the buyer or my name is on the contract of the contract to buy and sell, then I'll reduce the total to 5%. So in the event the broker represents the buyer to sell the property, the success fee reference will be reduced to 5% upon the closing of the transaction. Follow it? Okay, this is the exciting part. I've been writing that first part for years. Okay, what happens if your seller says, well, Margaret, I'll pay you 3.2%, but I'm not offering anything to the buyer's agents. Now, here comes my name on the contract to buy and sell. Do I want to do double the work for no extra income? Probably not. So listen, in the event broker also represents the buyer in the sale of the property, the success fee referenced in 7.1.1 will be increased to 4.2% upon the closing of the transaction to said buyer, or whatever I'm negotiating. I'm guessing the only people that are excited about this right now are listing agents who've had this happen to them. But that clause is so important, right? So that's clearly one he wrote as a result of the NAR settlement, and I'm super stoked about it. So questions on that one? You guys are so quiet. All right, video.
So you would add to this clause based on, is that what your statement you just made, because you're, if you bring the broker, you bring, we increase to.
So if the seller says, Jeff, I'm happy paying you your 3.2% to be my listing agent, but I'm not offering anything to the buyer's agent. So up in that section 7.1.1 of the exclusive right to sell, it shows 3.2 and then you show 0 to the buyer's agent, right?
Yeah.
Well, then you find the buyer and your name's on the contract to buy and sell representing the buyer, you might increase your total compensation to 4.2.
Oh, I was thinking this would say either increase or decrease. You'd say you keep this in there and you could increase or decrease.
You use either one, whichever is applicable, right?
Yeah.
So if I got 6% with 2.8 going to the buyer broker, I might say, but if I have both sides, the total goes to 5. But if it says 6 and 2.8, then the total goes to 5 because I'm getting the whole pie. But if he says 3.2 and 0, I might bump it to 4.2 if I have to work both sides. Got it? Good question. All right, somebody asked me a question in the chat. What do we want to know? Got it. Interesting. Oh, by 0.5%. Well, I guess everybody's got their own things. That's interesting. I would have never thought that one. So what Karen just said is that their agent said, well, if we go under contract or get it closed in 30 days, my fee goes from 6 to 5.5. Like you could put a clause in there like, that's different. Never seen that.
Oh, should charge less if you didn't have to stay on the market.
Think about the cost of staging. It could be absolutely worth it in the right environment for the right property, right? Okay, last one, and we will get done on time. So this is inserted into section 932, which is the part of the exclusive right to sell, which is about broker marketing. And this is that section where it talks about in the video and what cannot be videotaped. So this is what he's suggesting we write in there as just standard. Seller is strongly encouraged to remove any items, example, family photos, jewelry, antiques, etc., that seller does not want appearing in any pictures or video. Broker will notify seller at least 24 hours prior to taking any videos or pictures. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. So, all right, with that, oh, I'm worn out. Does anybody want to ask the coach? All right, questions? We lost some people, but that's okay. Questions? All right, give me a takeaway. Tell me something y'all learned. Or something you didn't know before.
There's a lot of, clauses, a lot more clauses than I realized.
Yeah. A lot of clauses. Anything else?
I think
Writing a contract.
Are you really? Woohoo! Open houses work.
the backup contract was a new thing.
Backup contracts, yeah. Yep.
Know about the TBD title commitment, so there you go.
There you go. 10 years in the business and you didn't know what a TBD title commitment was. All right. All right. What else? Anybody else? All right. Thanks for coming, guys. Thanks for playing. Jamie, did you have something?
Nope, just wanted to say thank you. Thank you.
You are welcome. I saw you bounced off of mute. So, all right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you all later. Bye.
Okay.